Good morning, and thank you for joining us at SAFE Summit 2026, The Pillars of Power, a strategy for energy and industrial resiliency. Please welcome the founder and executive chairman of SAFE, Robbie Diamond.
Welcome to the SAFE Summit 2026 Pillars of Power. It's been a monumental year at SAFE, having major transition with myself stepping down as CEO and assuming the role of executive chairman, and Avery Ash stepping up to be the CEO. So I'd be remiss not to start the summit by simply thanking Avery for making this a smooth transition and offering him my full support and wishing him good luck. Many of you know him, but the rest of you will have the opportunity to hear from him, even on the next panel, and meet him during the summit. I'd also be remiss not to note the passing of Fred Smith, the founder, chairman, CEO of FedEx. Many of you have had the privilege of listening and learning from Fred Smith at the last 3 summits, but also over the last 20 years at SAFE. He was a true patriot who was always thinking of the country that he loved and provided him the opportunity to create such an incredible company like FedEx. He won 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Silver Stars in Vietnam, and then went on to found a company that revolutionized the world, and more incredibly, went on to run it for more than 40 years. As you heard from him, the OPEC oil embargo almost strangled FedEx in its early year of operation, and he always understood and knew the risks and deleterious impact of oil dependence on the US and the global economy. But more importantly, he knew that oil dependence was a national security risk, and someone who lived through war knew that oil was not a reason we should sacrifice our blood and treasure. He was the most knowledgeable person when it came to the need for oil to run the global mobile economy, and knew more about planes, trucks, ships than any person in the world. He always put facts and data above his ideology. He once said to me as we walked out of a Wall Street Journal editorial meeting, that it's easy to be an ideologue when you've never been in a foxhole or running a company. He brought instant credibility to SAFE, and we'd be nowhere without him. I personally owe him a debt for making me a better leader and a person, so thank you. You will be missed by all of us at SAFE and by the entire country. And although there's some change within SAFE, the world sadly remains the same. As Ecclesiastes 1:9 says, what has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Here we are in 2026. We are experiencing another oil shock and watching how the need for energy and resources drive conflict, and why energy and resources win and lose wars. SAFE was launched by creating an oil crisis simulation. Where we put together a former cabinet of cabinet members and forced them to play out an oil crisis in real time. We created scenarios from sinking ships and tankers in the Bosphorus Straits, to a conflict in Nigeria, to hurricanes in the Gulf, to a closure in the Strait of Hormuz. We played these scenarios countless times, and no matter who was the cabinet, the lesson was always the same. They would say, I wish the previous administration or Congress had dealt with this problem, because there are a few good short-term solutions. I'm happy to report that since our oil shockwave in 2006, we're in a much better position today, thanks to US ingenuity and government policy. Back in 2006, we were producing approximately 5 million barrels a day, with oil imports going up and domestic production going down. Well, today we are net exporters. And I read this morning that we exported 6 million barrels in April, double from last month, and more than we produced in 2006. However, SAFE was founded because we never believed we could drill our way out of this problem. We also needed to reduce the importance of oil for each dollar of our GDP, and thankfully there too we have made improvements since 2006. We are 30% less oil intensive, which is in addition to the 50% less oil intensive we are between 1973 to 2006. The less oil you need per dollar of GDP, the less dependent you are. In fact, we used 14 million barrels of oil for transportation in 2005, and now only need 13.8, despite our growth in population and the size of our economy. Finally, we need to make sure that we are not dependent on oil for all transportation. And there we have seen both incredible progress, but it has been slow. We are only using 7% less oil for transportation from 2006, reducing our dependence from 96% to 89% today. We're on the cusp of a revolution in transportation with autonomous vehicles that will be electric. It is a revolution of batteries, sensors, big data, telecommunications, AI, autonomous, connected, shared, and electric, both on the ground and in the air, that will make the difference. In the end, we need to be doing the same things that SAFE advocated on day one. Produce what we can domestically with the highest standards. Use that oil efficiently so that we get more output per dollar of GDP. Use alternatives so that we are not only dependent on oil for transportation in a global mobile economy. And find alternative routes for oil so that we are not hostage to choke points, like in the Strait of Hormuz. We might now all be focused on the Strait of Hormuz, but the US lost the first phase of a bigger war this year due to our resource dependence, the trade war with China. It was our dependence on rare earth minerals that forced us to step back from the brink with China. However, we have started to rectify this problem, with the US making large, bold investments here and around the world to make sure that we are no longer dependent. But as we learned in oil shockwave, it will take time. But also like oil dependence, this is something we were warned about but ignored until it was too late. We have now been warned that we have the same risks when it comes to many minerals and materials, but more importantly, to industrial capacity, writ large. It was just last year, 2 years ago, that we produced a video here at the SAFE Summit, hearkening back on the arsenal of democracy, when the US tapped our industrial base to produce the energy and weapons needed for us and our allies to win World War II. Sure enough, just 10 days ago in the Wall Street Journal reports, the Pentagon approaches automakers, manufacturers to boost weapons production. These are the issues we'll continue to explore over the next 2 days, and we'll continue to work with you over the coming years. So we've named this the Pillars of Power. And why we wrote the Pillars of Power was for just this reason. And this is why we organize our work around it. We realized that it wasn't just one thing that you had to solve, but a myriad of things. We needed to think about where we got our energy and resources. We needed the energy to turn those resources into something. We needed the industrial capacity in order to do that efficiently in our economy. And finally, we needed new technology from AI to sensors to big data, so we'd use less and be able to get more out of everything we produce. And this is why we have this comprehensive approach and have organized our organization around it. We have a Center for Grid Security, a Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, a Center for Critical Minerals Strategy, a Strategic Industrial Materials Center, plus our sister organizations, our Electrification Coalition, and our European Initiative for Energy Security. And so really, that is how we think of the world and how we would like to work with you in order to change it. And I'd be remiss without thanking really the executive directors who run those centers. And that is what's been so fundamental to growing this organization to where we are today. Joe Quinn, Abigail Hunter, Danielle Russo, and our newest executive director of our Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, Rachel McCleary, as well as our overall groups like Jeff Gerlach, who runs our policy, and our government affairs and communications. And Alberic Mongrenier, who's in Europe, and Ben Prohaska running the Electrification Coalition. I really do ask you to go talk to them during these couple days. So also, I'd like to thank Leslie Hayward and Bridget for putting on this summit. It is a very big undertaking. Every year they say, we really have to do it again. And I say, yes, we're going to do it again. But we're very excited that it always gets bigger and better. I want to thank our sponsors for supporting us. Without them, we would not be able to do this. On Saturday, I decided to ask ChatGPT, because you have to finish every speech these days with AI. I had to ask ChatGPT, like, I said, I've been asking questions for months, but never said who I was. And I said, would you believe that I'm the founder of SAFE? And they said, whoa, this makes so much sense now with all the questions you've asked. Of course, it's ingratiating itself to me. And I said, what will the next 10 years look like? And they said, well, it was very smart to pivot from oil to all these resources. Your next 10 years are going to be more important than your last 10 years. So I leave it to that team and to Avery to make sure that the next 10 years are more important and that we get more done. Because America still needs the energy and the resources and the industrial capacity to win, and we're here to help make that happen. I'd like to introduce a video before the next panel entitled Pillars of Power. Thank you very much.